Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia Online. My name is Jason Freeman, and I'm a producer and editor here in the Author Events office, and it's my honor to introduce tonight's author. Issac J. Bailey is the author of the memoir, My Brother Moochie, a raw, firsthand account of the author's older brother's longtime incarceration for a murder that The Guardian called a painful indictment of American inhumanity woven with threads of grace and love. The James K. Batten Professor of Public Policy at Davidson College, Bailey was a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University and taught journalism at Coastal Carolina University. His award-winning work has been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Time, amongst many other periodicals, and he has appeared on many networks, including NPR, CNN, and MSNBC. Tonight, he is here with his new book, Why Didn't We Riot? A Black Man in Trumpland. Addressing such topics as Confederate iconography, police brutality, and white discomfort, this essay collection explores what it means to be Black in Trump's America. Kirkus Reviews calls it a, quote, powerful lesson in history and truth that is brilliant, searing, and surprisingly vulnerable. Tonight, Mr. Bailey will be in conversation with Philadelphia's own Tracey Matisak, an award-winning broadcaster, journalist, and great friend of the Free Library and the Free Library Author Events Office. Issac and Tracey, the screen is all yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much and welcome everyone. So glad that you could be with us on a rather rainy evening here in the Philadelphia area, but I am absolutely delighted to be here with Issac Bailey. And I just want to underscore what Jason said about the Q&A, that we've budgeted some time toward the end of our conversation for your questions. So you can just click on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type your question in there, and we will get to as many of them as we can. But that said, Issac Bailey, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's like, thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
So you start off the book, before we kind of do a deep dive on the book, early on, you make a prediction about the presidential election. And your prediction was that Donald Trump would receive 60% of the white vote, or that at least he would receive even more than he received the last time. And if the exit polls are correct, it sounds like you were pretty spot on. It's looking like about 57% or so. So let me just ask you, first of all, your reaction to the results of the election.
Yes, one is that, frankly, that I am so that glad that Trump is on his way out, frankly. Yes, and because I think that there is this sort of cloud that is kind of lifting. Yes, and also though that actually does not mean that I sort of actually want things to go back to normal. Yes, in term. I mean, ask me, but I sort of actually just want things to get better, and I think that this is the first step towards that. Mm-hmm. And also, yes, and then that I am still sort of torn though, at least actually when it comes to the white vote, simply because it is still sort of hard to swallow how any kind of racial group could have actually looked at the past 4 years and actually said, give me more. And yet that that is what we have actually with the white vote. So that part of it is something to think about still.
Well, and interestingly, Issac, I'm wondering how you account for the increase in minority votes for Trump this time as well. The New York Times says that 8% of Black women voted for him, which is double the amount of last time. 18% of Black men voted for Trump, and I think it was something like 13% the last time. So what do you make of that he, and certainly the Latino vote as well, but I'm thinking of Black voters in particular. What do you make of that?
Yes, I mean, one is that especially with like this, the sort of like early sort of like data points, like especially some actually with like the exit polls that like we actually need to be like very careful with them, simply because like they are not exact, and also sort of like especially this year, like of course, like it actually was like much harder, like in order to like actually really get that right, simply because like of the pandemic, and also like the sort of like massive like mail-in vote, et cetera, like all those sort of things. Like and yet though that I'm sort of and yet though that even if those numbers were accurate, for instance, well yes, and then that like all that like actually shows like is that like they sort of like actually have actually gone back at least like actually to the sort of like George W. Bush era numbers. Well, yes, and I believe like in sort of probably like in sort of really in sort of like 1 year, like he actually got like either between like 11 or sort of like 13% like of the black vote, like and also sort of like 40% like of the Hispanic vote. I mean, yes, so like essentially, like what happened kind of like in between that time, of course, I'm sort of like actually like was the sort of my nation's like first black president, which sort of like actually changed everything. Which means that like if you actually take out his numbers, I mean yes, and then that like this sort of like is the sort of this is sort of the kind of like norm, like at least like actually for the black vote, like and like the GOP.
So those numbers, I guess, in that respect, may not be so surprising because that's what you might normally see. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you think about President Trump's refusal to acknowledge the results of the election?
Yes, I mean, as a journalist, like it has been a struggle, at least to like actually try to find like the sort of like right way to balance this out, like and because like one like is that like he actually will be gone on January 20th. Yes, I mean like that's yes, really yes, like I don't have any doubts about that. And yet though that like he can like actually cause a like he can still like actually cause damage like actually right now, and also like which is like the thing that really concerns me most. Yes, like and because like especially in sort of like states like mine, for instance, there are a lot of Trump fans, like who are sort of like who actually like who actually like who actually believe in a lot of conspiracy theories.
Right.
I mean, yes, and so like for me, like I don't want this to go on so long that like it is actually going to like sort of actually deepen that, and then like yes, like and also to like actually possibly something actually cause somebody to act. Yeah, yes, like and also so like lastly, of course, that like this is who this man is. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Yes, and then so that I mean, this is not a surprise, unfortunately.
So before we do a deep dive into the book, I have one other question regarding the election for you, Isaac, and that is that, you know, the conventional wisdom has been that so many white Americans voted for Donald Trump in 2016 because of economic angst, because they felt like they were not being heard. And in the book, you kind of deconstruct that and you dismantle that theory. Why do you think that's not the case?
Yes. I mean, it's like one, is the fact that like it sort of actually was like actually built on this like falsehood, like especially with the fact that our economy at the time like was actually growing, like and also just like and also the fact that like we sort of actually like were on like the sort of like longest streak of sort of like job creation kind of in our history. Like, and also in sort of like 2015, for instance, like we actually had like the sort of my highest sort of the sort of I mean the sort of my highest increase like in sort of that income, like actually like for poor people and also like the sort of like middle class. And yet, at least like actually during that period, yes, and then that you actually had Trump, like who was like, actually calling all of that fake news, you know, cookbooks, etc., like all of that stuff. And yet, as soon as like he actually got elected, yes, and then that suddenly he and his supporters like were like actually like suddenly sort of actually bragging about those numbers and like actually saying that it actually was because of Trump. Yes, like which wasn't accurate. Yes, like and also sort of like my sort of like main point on that like is the fact that like for sort of like especially for sort of like Black and brown people, for instance, sort of like actually like were like actually hurting sort of like more than white people. At least like actually when it came to the economy, and yet
they did not vote for Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Isaac, I want to ask you about the title of your book, which is Why Didn't We Riot? The subtitle is A Black Man in Trumpland. What's the significance of that title? And tell us how you would describe Trumpland.
Yeah. I mean, yes, like, well, yes, like I sort of actually was actually trying to use the image like of a riot, I mean, just to express my anger and I'm sort of like frustration. Just like, and also sort of, like, especially because like over like the past 4 years, like I saw, like I saw, I saw like media, sort of, like journalists, sort of like actually, I'm like, I'm sort of actually focused on Trump supporters so much that like they essentially ignored all of the like all of the folks like who actually looked like me in places like this. Like, and then so like for me, especially when it comes to the so-called so-called like Trumpland, like I just like I sort of actually see that like as this area like where there are a like a lot of Trump supporters, like which we have to deal with like everywhere, like at school, like at church, at the baseball game, etc. Like that, and also just like and also that like we also sort of actually have to deal with like other folks like who are sort of actually constantly sort of actually telling us I mean, at least to like actually not deal with the racism, simply because like it actually might hurt their feelings.
So in that respect, Trumpland can be really anywhere in the USA. It's certainly not confined to the South where you live.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was interested, Isaac, to read about your struggles as a journalist, and especially when you were working in print, in writing, not only writing about race, but even talking with your colleagues in the newsroom about race. And you write about the challenge of trying to write honestly about race, and then sort of managing the risk, right, between being honest and protecting the feelings of your white readers and your colleagues, and maybe even risking losing your job. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and sort of how you navigated that tightrope?
Yes. Like that was exhausting. Yes, like, and because like one of the things about this, like, is that like it actually wasn't about, you know, racism per se, like in terms of sort of like, yes, in terms of like somebody like actually like purposely, at least like actually trying to be racist toward, no, not that. Yes, but that like it actually was more difficult. Simply because like it actually was like it was actually coming from I'm sort of like my sort of like white colleagues, really, and sort of like who actually thought that they were doing me a favor, like actually by like actually trying to guide me through, you know, race and racism, etc. And then that, yes, and then that like what was really frustrating about that, like was the fact that I sort of actually had sort of actually done, like all of the work on these issues. Like I sort of actually had actually done like all of the research and the critical thinking, etc. And yet that like they were like actually still like, actually trying to guide me on something that that sort of like they sort of like actually like had not really fully explored.
You had done all the homework.
Yes. Yes, and then that, yes, and then that, yes, like, and yes, like, and also that, even as I was telling them that there is actually going to be a like certain like portion like of our audience, really, like who would always see me really like as the black dude, like, and just like and some actually judge me no matter what. And yet that, and yet though that, I'm like yet though that, like they actually could not hear me say that, and also sort of like just like and also sort of like actually like actually try to like actually pressure me like in order to like actually try to get through to those readers anyway. And so like that actually was exhausting, you know, like, like just like as I said earlier.
Isaac, I want to take a moment because I'd love to share with our audience just a little passage from your book to give people kind of a flavor of your writing, and just a little sampling for those who have not yet read the book. It says, "It's not happenstance that there has never been racial equality in America, a country which coupled race-based chattel slavery with its demand for liberty and justice. That makes the Black story unique in ways I wish it wasn't. We don't know what it feels like to just be American in a country that from the beginning hated and despised us for being Black, and now hates and despises us for refusing to relinquish that Blackness. And yet here we are, still rising. Though they enslaved us, we didn't give up. Though they lynched us, we didn't give in. Though they kill us on video in broad daylight and hide behind shiny badges to absolve themselves of all responsibility, we refuse to back down. I didn't have to take the adverse childhood experiences test or study trauma's effects on the developing child's brain as I did at Harvard University for a year to know that truth. I can feel it in my bones. I can't not feel it. I can hear it subtly coursing through my veins. It colors everything I think and feel. That's the part of the American story many don't want to hear, that we overcomers have wounds that won't heal, that can only be managed, that we must reconcile ourselves to. That's not a cry for help. It's a scream for recognition, not for those of us who have trod the stony road, but for those still making their way up the rough side of the mountain. So that is just a sampling of this beautifully written book. So for those of you who have not yet read it, that is what you have in store. But I just thought that that passage really spoke to what this book is about and gives us a really good flavor for that. Issac, you've written so honestly about your childhood and the many difficulties that you faced growing up in your family. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that sort of informs your life and work now?
Yeah, sure. And like one of the open wounds, like is kind of like is sort of like what it is that you actually literally hear, like in my voice, like is my stutter, for instance, like is sort of like one of the sort of manifestations like of that early childhood trauma, like which sort of like actually included I'm sort of like actually at least like actually sort of I'm like seeing like my dad sort of actually beat my mom, and also sort of like actually dealing with poverty, and also sort of at least like actually when I actually was like 9 years old. I mean, yes, and then that my sort of like oldest brother, so I mean, he actually went to prison like actually for like murder. Yes, and so like all of those things combined, and also sort of like at least sort of yes, like and also that like I mean, this was happening in the deep South, where like at least like the sort of like ghost of sort of like Jim Crow, like are sort of they actually still linger.
Mm-hmm.
And that was yes, like in that was so many different kinds of ways. Uh, uh, yes, I mean yes, and then yes, well yes, like also and like one of the toughest things about it, like is that like on like the one hand that like they actually try to like actually make you hate your black skin, and also sort of like actually try to like actually make you doubt your self-worth, like as a black person. Yes, and also sort of like on top of that, yes, and then that like even sort of actually when you make it out anyway, and then they try to like actually use your story like in order to like actually shame others like who are still struggling.
Well,
But
you
yeah,
wrote about that and you said that there was a time when you told your story differently, and it
right,
was sort of the pull yourself up by the bootstraps
yes,
version. But you said that you found that that was actually harmful
yes,
to other people who were still struggling,
yes,
because the hearers would say, well, you made it. What's wrong with everybody else? And you
exactly,
wrote that that changed the way that you now tell your story.
yes. I mean, it's like absolutely, and then that like that is why like like I try to tell people time and time again that I am not a self-made man, that I am not a self-made man, that I am not here like only because I was tougher than everybody else and smarter than everybody else and did the right thing all the time, simply because that's not true. Yes, and because like I sort of actually needed food stamps like in order to like actually survive, and also that like we actually needed like these sort of we actually needed we actually needed like these sort of like free lunches, like and like those like long boxes of sort of like cheese, like actually from the government, and the white beans, yes, golly, like and like the powdered milk, and just like and these sort of like Pell Grants, and I ordered so many other things. Like I sort of actually needed all of those things, like in order to like actually get to where I am now.
Mm.
Just like and also that I got like yes like I got sort of like breaks. I mean at least like sometimes like actually from a like kind teacher. Just like and also from like strangers, and like so many different kinds of people. Really like who are really like who actually made me possible. Yes, and so like for me, like I try to like actually emphasize like that piece of the story. Excuse me. Yes. Uh, but yes, like, and because like I don't want anybody to like actually be let off the hook. Just like, and also that I, just like I sort of also want just like I just like I sort of also want like folks to know that like their little piece like actually can also sort of actually make a difference, like actually for a that struggling that child as well.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the racial reckoning that we have seen this year in America. And you mentioned several cases in the book, instances of police brutality, instances of criminal justice gone awry. And certainly it seems that the reckoning that we've seen in America started in earnest with the murder of George Floyd. And then you probably know that here in Philadelphia, we had a police shooting recently in West Philadelphia, Walter Wallace, and plenty of protests following that as well. Wonder what you made of all that and what you were thinking as you watched these protests unfold all through the summer and kind of how you were thinking about that.
Yeah. Yes, and that like that too was something that like I was just like I was like also like struggling with. It's like, and because at least like on like the one hand, like I was trying to be somewhat optimistic, simply because like we had never seen like that level of protest that widespread for like that long. Yes, like which is a good thing. Yes, and so like I saw that, and I was trying to like actually hold on to that. Yes, me, but also like yes, like I sort of like yes, like I sort of like absolutely know how hard it is like in order to like actually make real long lasting change. And then so like my sort of like fear about it like was that like we would like actually have the all of this energy, yes, and then that like it actually would like actually just lead to that couple of changes, yes, and then that like it would die out, yes, and then that like all of the rooted in problems would still be there at the end.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's like that is still my fear, at least about this reckoning.
So, Isaac, one of the conversations that I was hearing, during the summertime was that, the protesting is important and critical, and it needs to keep happening. And we need to draw attention to things that have been going on for 400 years. And now we kind of have that attention. Is there a point where it's time to maybe call a halt to the protesting and begin to, try some other avenues to really strategize, to come off the street and really begin to strategize? Okay, we've got attention. What do we do now to create that meaningful change, the long lasting change that you were just describing?
Yes. I mean, yes, like, and like for me, like, I think that we actually need to like actually keep on doing both. I guess like, and sort of like one of the good trends that I've seen recently is is that we are like now starting to actually get in sort of like these kinds of prosecutors really like who really like who actually seem to understand that like justice like isn't only about punishment. I mean, yeah. So like if we start there, and I think that that is happening more and more. I'm like fortunately.
And
And
when you say that justice is not just about punishment, what do you mean?
uh, uh, yes, like, and because at least like actually for a very very long time in this country, that like if you were so-called like I mean, at least like sort of like real kind of like tough on crime, and then you like actually sort of actually went for like long prison sentences, and you actually tried to at least like actually sort of like actually like 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 yes, like, and sort of like even try to like actually prosecute kids as adults, etc. Uh, uh, I mean, yes, and then that actually was the kind of bipartisan standard, like in this country for a very long time, and it actually caused a lot of problems all over this country. Yes, and it's, I mean, yes, and it's like for me that I mean, at least I'm actually so like I'm actually yes, just like I'm actually seeing that sort of like that is changing somewhat. Yes, and it's like for me, like kind of like if we can keep pushing on that by itself, yes, and then like I think that actually would do. Uh, oh my God, yes, I mean like it actually would be so that great like over the long haul.
Yeah. You write that white evangelical Christianity is not incompatible with white supremacy.
Right.
You are a Christian yourself. For many years, you worshiped at a white evangelical church. I have noticed, Isaac, that since 2016, there have been a number of stories popping up in the media about Black Christians who worshiped at white evangelical churches who have left and found themselves feeling sort of spiritually homeless and trying to figure out what the next step is, owing to the election of Donald Trump and the support that they saw in those churches. Can you talk about your experience, why you left, and sort of your read on white evangelical support for Donald Trump?
Yeah, that has been one of the most painful parts of this period, frankly. Yes, because it actually felt like this deep betrayal, honestly. Yes, like, and because that, like, these were people that I sort of actually went to church with, like as you said, and prayed with, and so my aunt sort of actually loved on their kids and had them love on mine, etc. Like all of those things, like, and also that like I was like actually able to witness to them, like at least like in terms of at least like about race and racism, etc. Like over all of those years, we did all of those things together, and it seems as though that like it had been like actually making a difference, and yet as soon as I'm sort of as soon as sort of I'm gonna like he actually came down that on the golden escalator. Yes, and then suddenly they actually rushed to him anyway, and sort of like even as like he was saying like all of these like ugly and like racist things about Black people, yes, about Mexicans, about yes, I mean like time and time again, and yet like my sort of yes yes like my sort of like white sort of that Christian friends were embracing him, and it like it actually cut deeply, and yes like and also that I mean yes like and also that like that is like one of the sort of like toughest things at least for me, I mean, like as a Christian, so like actually coming out of this era is yes like is because like if I mean, like if my faith so actually can be used in service like of a man like Donald Trump. Yes, and then that what good is it? And that is a question that I am still struggling with.
Yeah. So, right. So it sounds like you're still sort of wrestling through.
Yeah.
Where am I in all of this, and where does my faith land in the midst of all of this?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I want to talk about Confederate monuments because you write about those as well in the book. And Brian Stevenson has said, living in Alabama, that he lives in a land that is littered with monuments to, sworn enemies of the United States at one point. Certainly there has been a reckoning over that this year as well, over these Confederate monuments. Some have come down in the wake of George Floyd's murder, but then there are plenty of people who are determined to keep those monuments there, to continue to fly the Confederate flag. And so I'm wondering for you, as a Black man in the South, certainly you're no stranger to these markers. How are you thinking about those monuments these days?
At least for me, like what I try to equate it with is that really like is that like if you can like actually think about like actually being a Jewish person in Germany like after the war, like after Hitler, etc., and then that and yet though sort of like at your sort of like Capitol building, I mean, yes, and then that like you actually saw like these monuments to Hitler, like and sort of at least like at the sort of like courthouse door, yes, and you saw like these monuments to Hitler, like and also that like you actually had to drive on like roads, excuse me, yes, in terms of yes, like and sort of actually named after his lieutenants, etc. Well, like that is how it has felt here, like as a Black person, like in a place like this. Yes, like and also sort of on top of that, like what we have had, sort of actually from our sort of yes, our sort of like white friends, etc. Like, is this kind of like admonishment, like at least for us to like actually, at least like actually try to like sympathize, sort of like actually with like all of the folks like who are sort of actually waving those flags, etc. And yes, and I mean yes, and it's like for me, well yes, and yes, like, and like for instance, like in like the summer of like 2015, that like I was there, at least like actually when like the flag, sort of like was like actually finally taken down, like off of our sort of like state house grounds, like after the like massacre by like Dylan Roof.
And that was at the church
Yes,
in South
yes,
Carolina. Yes, at the
yes,
Bible study.
exactly. Yes, and then that yes, and then that like I was like somewhat happy about it coming down, obviously, and yet though that I sort of like actually could not stop, at least like actually thinking about how that flag should have never been there in the first place. And so like what was happening like is that like we were like actually like trying to get back to zero almost. Yes, and then and yet though that at least with like all of those emotional scars are still there, like actually from like all of these monuments and statues, and also like especially the fact that we sort of are sort of actually walking on ground, sort of like where there were slaves right on these grounds, like in addition to all of those monuments and statues, sort of like actually for the enslavers. I mean, so like it is taxing like every single day living here because of that.
And the president has defended those monuments and said this is our heritage and
Exactly.
wants to keep them there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have, Isaac, a number of questions from our audience. So let's dive into a few of those and see what we've got here. Darren wants to know, do you feel that there should be reparations from the federal government as a means of compensating descendants of former slaves for previous crimes against humanity in the form of slavery?
Yes, and that at least for me, that I sort of actually have been grappling with this question for a long time. Yes, like and because at least like actually for like a long time that I've always had like this kind of like feeling like whereas that it actually should not happen, like should not be necessary, etc. Simply because like our sort of yes, in terms of that, like we sort of like always have been taught here, at least to like actually just try to ignore like all of the bad stuff and like actually just move on, etc. And yet though now that like my kind of view on that like has like really changed. Uh, yes, like and because like I think that like one of the things like which is like holding like this country back like is our refusal in order to like actually really be honest about like ourselves. And I think that like this kind of like process, like even sort of actually talking about sort of like reparations, like is a like really important step, like at least to like actually trying to get to truth. Yes, and so like for me, like I think that that kind of truth now like is so vital, like which is why that like I am I'm definitely sort of just like I am just like I am sort of I'm sort of like much more in favor of it now like than I was like even 5 years ago.
Okay. Teresa says, your essay on Black men and violence captured a deep personal vulnerability. How can Black people overcome the unsubstantiated fear that we have toward each other?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. You actually definitely, like actually tapped into one of the toughest, like chapters that in that book. And because, it is like it is like one thing like in order to like actually have that white people stereotype us or like actually be afraid of us, etc. Like which is bad by itself. Yes, but it is another thing like in order for us to like actually be afraid of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that like that is something that I know that I have like absolutely like actually had to overcome and so actually still like fighting against, frankly. Uh, 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 yes, and yes, and so like for me, like that too, like is sort of how like it is like a why that I sort of like actually now, excuse me, at least like actually try to find ways in order to actually uplift Black people, like in particular. Yes, like and also to like actually just try to sort of remind us like of our strength, like and also like of our worth and our beauty, and also like our doggedness, like in order to actually just keep on pushing forward no matter what. Mm-hmm. Yes, like and because like we sort of actually have been told we actually have been told like so many lies about ourselves. Mm-hmm. That it is almost impossible in order for us to like actually not sort of like actually take at least like some of that in. Yes, and so like for me, like like that too is sort of like why I sort of actually wrote my first book, like in particular, just like is because like I am trying to like actually get us like actually at least like actually yes, like in order to like actually feel less shame. Yes, like and also just to like actually explain yes, in terms of kind of like how these sort of like systems and structures sort of actually got us to this place. Yes, and so like again for me, like it is absolutely vital that like we sort of like absolutely like actually understand our worth and our value.
You know, I thought it was so interesting in the book where you said that violence has a way of clarifying things, and you talked about Liam Neeson and sort of that infamous admission that he you know, fantasized about murdering a random Black man because a friend of his had been assaulted by a Black man. And when you had a tragedy in your own family that, you know, your first thought was, the first person that you pictured was an African American, and you, I was so struck, Issac, by your honesty and vulnerability in writing that and saying, hey, this is a really thorny thing that I'm having to wrestle through as a Black man.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, yes, and it's like, and also sort of, it's like, and sort of actually going all the way back to sort of yes, I guess that my son like actually was like born 19 years ago, and then that like Lee sort of like actually like as my wife was pregnant, like my sort of like first fear, frankly, like was that it actually would be a boy. And I sort of actually feared that simply because I knew that I was struggling like in order to like actually separate at least like this idea of violence from young Black men. Yes, and so like that was how sort of that was how sort of sort of sort of like that like it was like that deep uh 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 at least like in me. And then I mean yes, and then that like it is like actually taken I mean like frankly like a lot of counseling and also like a lot of prayer, like in order for me to stop seeing I mean, yes, in terms of sort of I'm like violence and sort of like Black men paired together. Yeah, yes, like and also sort of like yes, like I was trying to be honest that way, even though that it hurt. Okay, by the way, be frank with you. Yes, like is because like I sort of like actually want. Yes, like I sort of actually want to like actually make space for like other people to actually be able to like actually be honest about it as well. Yes, and then sort of like out of that honesty, yes, and then that I think that like we can like actually pull each other kind of like out of that dark place.
Yeah. So appreciate your honesty in writing about that and giving people space for that very thing, for that, what is sometimes a lifelong process.
Yeah.
Another question from Jake, and this one says, you wrote about Obama reaching out to angry white people in this country back in 2015. The same people would eventually become Trump's base. What were you seeing back then that allowed you to project what this country would look like today?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And so like essentially, like I saw the ground for somebody like Trump, like all the way back in like 2008. Yes, like simply because like I sort of actually was like in this place like and sort of yes like and that like I sort of like actually had like this largely white and conservative readership. Yes, and then some about yes, and then so like it was like almost overnight in sort of like November of that year that like once Obama won that like their kind of attitude like towards me changed. Yes, yes, I mean like that. Yes, I mean like it actually got extremely angry and extremely racist, like almost overnight. It's like yes, and then that like it almost like stunned me. Yes, like and because I mean at least like actually yes, and because that like these folks like actually had been like so nice for many many years before that. Yes, and then so yes, and then that like once they changed like that, like in like November of like 2008, like it like never stopped. like it like never stopped. Yes, and then yes, and then so like for me, like yes, and then that like that sort of actually made it possible in order for somebody like Donald Trump to come in order to like actually use that anger, etc.
Yeah. You saw this coming from a long way off, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is a message here for you, Isaac. It says, "Dear Isaac, don't give up. Keep up the protests and speaking the truth. You have many supporters and like-minded thinkers here in South Carolina. This is your home and we are your people. Thank you for your writing, Professor Maggie Morehouse."
Oh, nice. Okay.
So that is
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
a word of encouragement for you from Professor Morehouse.
Good.
Let's see, a
Thank
couple more minutes here. This question says, why did we protest more than riot?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, yes, like, and that, at least like actually when I was coming up with the title of the book, I mean, yes, and then that, at least for me, like it actually was about how that, that, even though that like all of this stuff actually had been going on in our area for years, and yet like we talk about actually did not have any riots or even protests, like even after sort of, like even after like even after sort of like cases like where sort of like cops like actually shoots people and actually lie about it, and yes, yes, and then that like we sort of actually just sort of let it go again and again and again and again, and then I mean yes, and so like for me, at least like actually when I sort of like actually use the term riot, like I am yes, yes, like I am not talking about looting, like I am not talking about at least like actually sort of at least like actually sort of like burning up a CVS, etc. Like what I am actually talking about, like, is this really like clear and loud effort just to like actually make sure that sort of that like folks in power like absolutely like will always hear us, and sort of actually like absolutely like cannot ignore us, and also sort of actually like will be made to be like so uncomfortable that that sort of that that that's I guess that like they like absolutely will and absolutely have to act. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
so like for me, like that is what like I yes, like I want to see us keep on doing.
It's that communal scream that you
Yes,
talk about in the
exactly.
book. Yeah. Um, Stephen asks, what suggestions would you offer for Christian communities who are earnestly seeking to address the work of racial justice and cultivating anti-racism work?
Yeah. um, well, at least like the first thing that frankly, yes, like yes, like is that like just like this country sort of actually has to like actually start being honest with itself, like on kind of like on kind of like on like the issue of race. Our church like actually has to start there as well. I mean, yes, and so like for me, it's like actually when I look at Christianity, like in this country, and that like I am convinced that like if sort of that gonna like if sort of like white Christians sort of like actually decided tomorrow that at least in terms of that like they sort of like absolutely like actually would be no more structural racism, et cetera, like those kind of things, then it absolutely would change. I mean, simply because like they actually have the numbers and also like the power, like in order to like actually really be able to change something like that. And yet, though, for our entire history, that has never happened. Like that has never happened. And yes, like, and then that, like that is why, like I say, like in the book, that like our faith like as so like practice in this country like actually like has like absolutely never been like incompatible with white supremacy. And so like therefore like I think that we sort of actually have to start there, yes, like and like actually own up to that, and then like also say why that is.
Yeah.
Yes, and then yes, and then sort of actually just go from there.
Yeah. Some hard conversations need to be had, it sounds like.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Isaac, I want to ask you something that I have been asking people that I've had the privilege of interviewing lately, and that is that, you know, we're in the middle of this pandemic. We have watched this racial reckoning unfold. There is massive amounts of stress around the election, no matter what side of the political aisle you fall on. Immensely difficult year. And I wonder, in the midst of all of that, what gives you hope? What keeps you going in the midst of everything that is 2020?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, like, well, at least for me, like I know that like there sort of actually were so like folks like who actually came before me, really like who actually dealt with like even like tougher issues and got through and sort of actually forced progress on this country. Yes, and so like for me, like that example alone, sort of like always gives me hope, and it also sort of like fuels me, like simply because like kind of like it is saying that like it is my turn, like in order to actually I need to like actually keep pushing that rock forward, for sure. Yes, like and so like lastly, like what I try to do too, I mean, at least like in order to like actually not actually feel so helpless and down, etc., is that like I sort of actually try to like actually like remember that like we should also feel joy as well. Yes, and yes, and then so like for me, like I sort of always try to tell people that like we should like actually fight like this is actually when we must, but that like we must like actually dance but these are actually when we can. Yes, like and because yes, I think that like if we lose sight of that kind of balance, yes, and then that a sort of like sense of helplessness like actually can set in, and then that like that's all actually will be bad for us and also for the country overall.
Yeah, well said. Great advice. Isaac Bailey, thank you so much for putting this wonderful book into the world. Why Didn't We Riot? A Black Man in Trumpland. I would encourage you, if you haven't read it already, to please pick up a copy and appreciate the wisdom that is contained in this book. Isaac, thank you so very much for writing the book and for spending some time sharing it with us tonight.
Yes, so thank you very much for having me, Trace.
And thanks to all of you who have joined us tonight and spent some time exploring these very, very important issues. I want to thank Andy, Jason, Laura, the whole author events team at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Please be well, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Good night.